Alright, so H3H3, otherwise known as Ethan Klein, and Kaceytron are having a back and forth over the lawsuit situation where H3H3 sued Kaceytron as well as Frogan and Denims. And of course, this is an ongoing thing. The lawsuit hasn't concluded yet. And to deal with the legal expenses related to this, Kaceytron has put up this GoFundMe for herself. And as of right now, it's raised over $40,000. And so basically what happened was that on his Instagram account, H3H3 put up this screenshot of a tweet from Kaceytron, and then he wrote, "Kaceytron, you raised $44,517. You offered me $17,500. This leaves $27,017. Under no circumstances have you paid your lawyers $27,017. What were you planning on doing with the remaining money? Trying to catch a payday?" I rejected her offer, obviously. And this is a tweet that Yeet from Twitter shared, and the caption is, "Ethan Klein claims Kaceytron offered him a settlement of $17,500, which he rejected." Alright, so yeah, this has to do with that lawsuit that's going on here, of course. And, the thing about lawsuits is that it's very difficult and very costly for the lawsuit to go to trial, and, the regular way that a lawsuit concludes, that's very difficult, However, if you do a settlement, if you settle, that actually allows you to, avoid a lot of those costs and all the extra time that gets spent on that lawsuit. And, the lawsuit just comes to a close pretty quickly compared to how it would go if you don't settle at all. So, it's one of those things where it's an easier way to, just end the lawsuit quickly. And so what H3H3 is saying here is that Kaceytron actually offered him that $17,500 for a settlement so that, this lawsuit for her stops and, she doesn't have to deal with this going forward. But, the way that Ethan Klein, H3H3, the way he sees it, he's like, "Hey, look, on your GoFundMe, you've raised way more money than that. You've raised over $44,000. And so, what about the rest of the money?" Basically he's saying that he wants to be offered that entire amount as the settlement. He doesn't want her to be able to keep any of the money. So, he's saying that because the whole amount wasn't offered to him, he rejected that offer. And, in case you don't know, things have really, really heated up between H3H3 as well as Kaceytron, Denims, Frogan, these guys. Things have really heated up between them. So, if you're looking at this and you're going damn, he's just rejecting the $17,500, there's basically no goodwill here. So, whatever he can get in this situation, he's gonna get, right? So or at least he's gonna push for getting it. And so, yeah, he wants the entire amount. He doesn't want her to, in his own words, catch a payday. So, at this current settlement offer, he said, "You know what, I'm rejecting this." Now, real quick, I'd just like to say that I'm giving out shoutouts on this channel to people who subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment letting me know that they subscribed. If you do that, then in the next video, I'll give you a shoutout. Anyway, back to the video. So yeah, going back to what we were discussing regarding that settlement offer, the thing about these is that, lawyers themselves actually advise their clients that, at some point they should just take a settlement rather than letting the whole thing go to trial and, having to deal with all of that, because the settlement quickly closes this whole thing, it closes the lawsuit down. It ends it, it concludes it. And, this is something that the lawyer YouTuber who has the channel name Legal Mindset, that's something that Legal Mindset also says, whenever he's covering these kinds of lawsuits and things like that, given his background and all the knowledge that comes with that, he himself actually supports this thing where, you should just try to settle. You should go for a settlement because, the longer the lawsuit goes on, the more money you're going to lose because of legal fees. And also, of course, the time that you're going to be spending dealing with this lawsuit, and also the stress that comes with it, because, lawsuits are extremely stressful. And so the longer it goes on, the more you're going to have to deal with in terms of that stress over time. And, it's going to start to like creep into other aspects of your life. And, it might even like sort of overshadow your life for a certain period. You're definitely going to have that thing at the back of your mind, at least pretty much all the time. So that's why you're encouraged to actually settle whenever you're in situations like this. And so in that sense, it makes sense that Kaceytron wants to go for a settlement as well. Keep in mind, she's not the one who wanted this lawsuit in the first place, because she's not the one who sued. That was actually H3H3, Ethan Klein. So she didn't even want this in the first place, right? She didn't sign up for this, and so she's just trying to get out of this situation as soon as possible. So, this was like her attempt at that. And $17,500 is a pretty decent chunk of money. But of course, given how things are really heated right now between these two individuals, and there's, no goodwill here, basically, and H3H3 knows that she's raised well over $40,000. Because of that, he's like, you know what? I want the whole amount. I'm not going to settle for just like a piece of that, a piece of the amount of money you've raised through your GoFundMe, and then you get to keep the rest. In his mind, he's like, no, she's not going to get out of this and, end up keeping all that money for herself. And, the lawsuit is not a problem for her anymore and all that. So that's the way he's looking at this. And so now let's take a look at another tweet that she made in the same period. So here we have this tweet from Kaceytron that says, I want to take the time to also say that I am praying for that Olivia girl. I hope that during this mental health break, she can take the time to reflect on how she is devoid of morals and maybe get some. Okay, all right. Just for some context here, this person that she's talking about, Olivia, she's actually one of the people that was on the H3 podcast, which is this podcast by H3H3, Ethan Klein. And so, she was on that podcast, and because of all the back and forth between, people like Kaceytron and people in the H3 podcast, Olivia ended up feeling like she should take a break. And so, she took this break for her mental health from the H3 podcast. So for now, she's gone, and so this was something that was announced. And from what I understand, people were like initially saying that, she's completely quit. And, the people who didn't like her and didn't like H3H3, they were like celebrating. But from what I understand, H3H3 actually misspoke, and he ended up saying that she's quit. But actually what he meant to say was that she was taking a break. So, she's supposed to be back in the future at some point. So yeah, here in that tweet, Kaceytron was talking about her and that mental health break that she's taking. And in the end, she's like, I hope she takes the time to reflect on how she's devoid of morals and maybe get some. And, so she's, on one hand, she starts off the tweet by saying that, she's praying for her, but, at the end, she like words it like that. Clearly goes to show, she's not very happy with her. And I saw this kind of like sentiment online as well. The people who didn't like H3H3 and all that, they were like really celebrating this. They were like, woohoo, yeah, she quit, great. And so, the thing is that different people have like very different kind of thresholds, you could say, for like how much criticism and that kind of stuff online they have to deal with before they're like, you know what, I gotta just step away from this stuff, you know. And so, you know, it depends on the person. Some people, they really just do not care, you know, this kind of stuff just does not get to them whatsoever. Those kinds of people, you know, they tend to do pretty well online, I've noticed, you know. If you just don't really care, you know, this kind of stuff just doesn't bother you, and you know, you just keep pushing regardless. So there is that. But then of course, you know, there are situations where people are like, you know what, dude, like this is enough, you know, I gotta like take a break or whatever. So, you know, here that's what she's done. She's not quit, from my understanding of this. So, you know, it's not like she let it get to her to the point where she's like, oh, I'm just gonna completely step away. So she hasn't done that. But, you know, of course she has taken a break. So yeah, guys, those were my thoughts on the situation. And now I'm interested in hearing what you think down in the comments below. So leave a comment letting me know what you think, and we can have a discussion down there. And with all that being said, guys, this is Alexi, signing out.